I still remember the day I decided to change my life. It wasn't a dramatic moment. There was no thunder, no lightning, no background music playing to signal a turning point. It was a quiet Tuesday evening, and I was sitting on my bed, staring at my phone, scrolling through videos of people speaking English with so much confidence, so much ease, and I felt this heavy weight in my chest. It wasn't jealousy, it was longing. It was the kind of longing that makes you feel like you were standing outside a beautiful party, pressing your face against the glass, watching everyone laugh and dance while you were left out in the cold. Not because you are not invited, but because you don't know how to open the door. That was me. That was my relationship with English for years. I knew the grammar. I knew the vocabulary. I could read and write and pass exams with decent grades. But when it came to speaking, my tongue became a prisoner. My mind would go blank. My heart would start racing. I would rehearse a sentence in my head 1,000 times. And the moment I opened my mouth, it would come out all wrong. The words would stumble, my accent would feel foreign, my confidence would shatter into a million tiny pieces, and I would retreat back into my shell, promising myself that tomorrow I would try harder. But tomorrow always came, and I always failed until that Tuesday evening. Something shifted inside me. I don't know if it was exhaustion from my own excuses, or if it was a moment of clarity, or if it was simply the universe saying enough. But I made a decision. I told myself, you are going to become fluent in English in 60 days. And I didn't just say it as a wish, I said it as a command, I said it as a promise to my own soul. And I want to tell you this story not because I think I am special, but because I want you to know that if I can do it, so can you. And I am going to tell you exactly how I did it without filters, without pretending it was easy, and without sugarcoating the struggle. The first thing I did was change my relationship with fear. Fear was my biggest enemy. Every time I tried to speak, fear would whisper in my ear, "You sound stupid. They are judging you. Your accent is terrible. You are making mistakes. Just be quiet. Just stay silent. It is safer that way." And for years I listened to that voice. I let it win. But on that Tuesday, I realized something profound. Fear is not real. Fear is just a story we tell ourselves. It is a projection of the worst possible outcome, music. And the worst possible outcome in speaking English was that someone might laugh at me or correct me or think I am not smart. But I asked myself, so what? So what if they laugh? So what if they correct me? Will I die? No. Will my world end? No. Then why am I letting this imaginary monster control my life? So I decided to make a pact with myself. For the next 60 days, I would speak English every single day, no matter what. Even if I sounded like a robot, even if I made 10 mistakes in one sentence, even if my face turned red and my palms sweated, I would speak. I would not let the fear of imperfection stop me from expressing myself, music. And that was the first step. That was the foundation. Because without that mindset, no technique, no app, no course would have worked. You can have all the tools in the world, but if you don't have the courage to use them, they are just decoration. Now, let me tell you about the second thing I did. I stopped studying English and started living in English. There is a huge difference between the two. When you study English, you focus on rules, tenses, prepositions, conjunctions, you memorize lists of words, you do exercises, you take tests, and all of that is useful, but it is not enough, because language is not a subject. Language is a medium. It is a way of thinking, a way of feeling, a way of existing. And I realized that I had been treating English like a museum piece. Something to admire from a distance, something to analyze, but not something to touch, not something to breathe. So I decided to immerse myself. I snorts changed my phone language to English. I changed my laptop settings. I started watching everything in English, not just with subtitles, but with the subtitles off and then with subtitles on and then off again. I listened to English podcasts while I was cooking, while I was walking, while I was lying in bed trying to sleep. I listened to the same episode 5 times if I had to, just to catch every word, every nuance, every rhythm. I started reading books in English, not textbooks, but novels, memoirs, self-help books, books that made me feel something, books that made me cry or laugh or think. And I didn't read to understand every word. I read to feel the flow. I read to absorb the patterns. I read to let the language seep into my subconscious. And here's the secret that nobody tells you. Fluency is not about knowing all the words. It is about being comfortable with not knowing all the words. It is about being okay with ambiguity. It is about trusting that you can communicate even with a limited vocabulary. Because communication is not about perfection. It is about connection. I used to think that I needed a massive vocabulary to sound fluent. But the truth is, native speakers use only a fraction of the dictionary in their daily conversations. They use simple words, common phrases, and a lot of emotion. And I realized that I had been overcomplicating things. I was trying to sound like a professor when all I needed to sound like was myself, just in a different language. The third thing I did was the most uncomfortable, the most terrifying, and the most transformative. I started speaking to myself. Yes, you heard that right. I became my own conversation partner. Every morning I would stand in front of the mirror and talk to my reflection. I would narrate my day. I would describe what I was wearing, what I was eating, what I was planning to do. I would rant about things that annoyed me. I would practice arguments I wanted to have. I would tell myself stories. And at first it felt ridiculous. I felt like a crazy person. But slowly something beautiful happened. My mouth started getting used to the sounds. My tongue started moving more freely. The words started coming out faster, more naturally. And I stopped judging myself. I stopped correcting every little mistake. I just let the words flow. And then I took it a step further. I started recording myself. I would pick a topic, any topic, and I would speak about it for 5 minutes. I would record it on my phone, and then I would play it back. And oh my God, the first time I heard my own voice, I wanted to bury myself. My accent sounded weird. My grammar was all over the place. I used the wrong prepositions. I paused too much. I said a million times. It was painful. It was humbling, but I did not stop. I did it again the next day and the next day and the next. And after a week, I compared my first recording to my 7th recording, and I saw progress. It was small, but it was there. My sentences were longer. My pauses were shorter. My confidence was growing, and that progress gave me hope. The fourth thing I did was I changed my environment. I realized that if I wanted to speak English fluently, I needed to surround myself with English speakers. But here is the catch. I did not have anyone in my immediate circle who spoke English fluently. My friends spoke my native language. My family spoke my native language. My colleagues spoke my native language. So I had to create a new circle. I joined online communities. I found language exchange apps. I started talking to people from all over the world. I had conversations with a student from Brazil, a teacher from South Africa, an engineer from Germany, a writer from Australia, and I did not care if they were better than me. I did not care if they corrected me. I just wanted to talk. I wanted to connect. And I discovered that people are kind. People are patient. People appreciate effort. Nobody laughed at me. Nobody made me feel small. Instead, they encouraged me. They said, "Your English is good, keep going." And those words were like fuel for my soul. And I also started thinking, in English, this was a game changer. I realized that the reason I was slow was because I was translating in my head. I would think in my native language, translate it to English, and then music speak it. That translation process takes time, and in that time, the conversation moves on and you are left behind. So I forced myself to think in English. I started with simple thoughts. I am hungry. I want coffee. It is raining outside. And then I moved to more complex thoughts. I am feeling anxious about this meeting, but I know I am prepared. I am grateful for this moment, even if it is imperfect. I love the way the sunlight falls on my desk in the morning, and slowly my brain rewired itself. English became not a foreign language, but an internal voice. And when you think in a language speaking, it becomes effortless. It becomes instinctive. Now, let me address the elephant in the room. Mistakes. Oh, the mistakes. I made thousands of them. I still make them. I will always make them. And that is fine, because mistakes are not failures, they are feedback. Every mistake I made taught me something. When I said I have been here since 2 hours and someone corrected me for 2 hours, I never forgot that rule again. When I pronounced beach and wrong and embarrassed myself in front of a group of strangers, I never pronounced it wrong again. When I used the wrong tense and confused the entire conversation, I learned to pay more attention to time. So, I stopped being afraid of mistakes. I stopped being afraid of looking foolish. I realized that the people who judge you for your mistakes are not your audience. Your audience is the people who see your effort, who appreciate your courage, who understand that you are learning. And I want to say something about accents. For a long time, I was obsessed with sounding like a native speaker. I wanted to sound American or British or Australian. I thought that was the standard of fluency. But then I realized that fluency is not about sounding like someone else. Fluency is about being understood. It is about expressing your thoughts clearly and confidently. The world is full of accents. Every country, every region, every city has its own way of speaking, and that is beautiful. That is diversity. So, I stopped trying to mimic someone else's accent and started embracing my own. I spoke with my natural rhythm, my natural tone, my natural melody, and guess what? People understood me. They connected with me. They did not care about my accent. They cared about what I had to say. And that brings me to the most important lesson of all. Fluency is not about the language. Fluency is about the message. It is about the person behind the words. It is about your story, your passion, your uniqueness. When you speak from your heart, people do not focus on your grammar. They focus on your emotion. They focus on your truth. And I discovered that the more I spoke about things I truly cared about, the easier it was to speak. Because when you are passionate, you do not think about rules. You just speak. The words come from somewhere deeper than your memory. They come from your soul. So in those 60 days, I spoke about everything. I spoke about my childhood. I spoke about my dreams. I spoke about my fears. I spoke about the books I read, the movies I watched, the people I loved. I spoke about politics, about spirituality, about the meaning of life. I had deep conversations and silly conversations. I argued, I joked, I cried, I laughed. And in that process, English stopped being a tool and started being a part of me. It stopped being something I used and started being something I lived. And I want you to understand that this is available to you. This is not reserved for the privileged, the gifted, or the naturally talented. This is for anyone who is willing to be uncomfortable, to be vulnerable, to be persistent. Let me tell you about a specific moment, a moment that shifted everything. It was day 37 of my 60-day challenge. I had been practicing every single day. I had been speaking to strangers online. I had been recording myself. I had been thinking in English, and I felt like I was making progress. But I still doubted myself. I still felt like a fraud. And then I had a conversation with a woman from Canada. We were talking about mental health, about depression, about the pressure to be perfect. And I started sharing my own experience. I told her about the dark days, about the moments when I felt invisible, about the times I wanted to give up. And I was not thinking about tenses. I was not worrying about prepositions. I was just speaking. I was just being. And she listened, and when I finished, she said something that I will never forget. She said, "You have a beautiful soul, and your words touched me deeply." And in that moment, I realized that I had done it. I had not just spoken English, I had connected. I had made someone feel less alone. And that is the whole point of language. That is the whole point of life. After that day, my fear completely dissolved. I stopped seeing English as a barrier and started seeing it as a bridge to new friendships, new opportunities, new perspectives, a bridge to a bigger version of myself. And I want to tell you, the person I was on day 1 and the person I became on day 60 were not the same person. I was more confident, I was more expressive, I was more open, I was more willing to take risks. And that transformation was not just about language. It was about identity. It was about believing in myself. Now, I am not saying that 60 days is enough to become perfect. Perfection is a myth. But 60 days is enough to become fluent. Fluent means smooth and effortless. Fluent means being able to express yourself without constant hesitation. Fluent means being able to have a conversation without translating every word. And I achieved that not because I am a genius, but because I was consistent. I showed up every single day. I did not wait for motivation. Motivation is fleeting. It comes and goes like the wind. But discipline is steady. Discipline is reliable. And I made discipline my best friend. So let me share with you the routine that I followed so that you can adapt it to your own life. Every morning I woke up 30 minutes earlier than usual. I would sit in silence for a few minutes, take a few deep breaths, and then I would speak. I would speak about whatever came to my mind. Sometimes it was a story, sometimes it was a plan, sometimes it was a prayer. I would speak until my voice felt warm, until the words felt natural. And then during the day, I would find opportunities to speak English. I would order coffee in English. I would ask for directions in English. I would reply to emails in English. I would comment on social media posts in English. I would think out loud in English. And at night before I went to sleep, I would write a short reflection in English. Not a long essay, just a paragraph, a summary of my day, a thought, a feeling, and I would read it out loud to myself. That routine, that simple, consistent routine changed everything. And I also want to talk about the role of listening. Listening is the hidden half of speaking. You cannot speak well if you cannot listen well. So I trained my ear. I listened to podcasts, audiobooks, news, interviews, TED Talks. I listened to different accents, different speeds, different styles. I listened to the rhythm and the intonation. I listened to how native speakers connect their words, how they stress certain syllables, how they use pauses for effect. And I imitated them. I shadowed them. I repeated their sentences right after they said them. This is called shadowing, and it is one of the most powerful techniques for improving pronunciation and fluency. I would listen to a sentence, pause, repeat it, and try to match the melody exactly, and it felt like a game. It felt like singing along to a song, and it was fun. I also stopped judging myself harshly. I stopped saying things like, "I am so bad at English," or "I will never get it." Instead, I started saying, "I am improving every day, and every mistake is a step forward." The words we say to ourselves become our reality. If you keep telling yourself that you are a failure, you will become one. But if you tell yourself that you are a learner, that you are a warrior, that you are on a journey, you will become that the mind is powerful and you have to train it just like you train your tongue. And I want to say something to you who is reading this right now. I do not know where you are in your journey. Maybe you are just starting. Maybe you have been trying for years. Maybe you have given up. Maybe you are about to give up, but I want you to know that you are capable of so much more than you think. You are not defined by your current level, you are defined by your potential. And your potential is limitless. Do not let fear rob you of your voice. Do not let embarrassment rob you of your expression. Do not let perfectionism rob you of your progress. The beauty of language is that it belongs to everyone. It is not owned by the British, the Americans, the Australians, or the Canadians. It is a global tool, a shared resource, and you have as much right to speak it as anyone else. You have as much right to be heard. So speak. Speak even if your voice shakes. Speak even if your grammar is imperfect. Speak even if you are scared. Because every time you speak, you are reclaiming your power. Every time you speak, you are expanding your world. Every time you speak, you are becoming more of who you were meant to be. I want to tell you about the last day of my 60-day challenge. I was sitting in my room and I recorded myself one final time. I spoke for 10 minutes without stopping. I spoke about the journey, about the struggle, about the victory. I spoke about the tears and the laughter. I spoke about the strangers who became friends and the fears that became courage. And when I played it back, I did not hear a perfect speaker. I heard a human being. I heard a person who had fought for something and won. I heard a person who had refused to give up. And I cried. I cried tears of joy because I knew that I had done it. I had become fluent. Not perfect, but fluent. And that was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything. Now here I am months later, still learning, still growing, still making mistakes, but no longer afraid. And I am telling you this story because I want you to know that your story is not finished. You are holding the pen. You get to write the next chapter. You get to decide whether you will let fear win or whether you will rise above it. And I am not saying it will be easy. It will be uncomfortable. It will be frustrating. There will be days when you want to quit. There will be days when you feel like you are not making progress. But those days are the most important. Those are the days that separate those who succeed from those who give up. So when you feel like giving up, remember why you started. Remember the dream, the vision, the version of yourself that you want to become, and keep going. I want to leave you with this. The world is waiting to hear your voice, your ideas, your stories, your wisdom, your humor, your love. They are all inside you, and they deserve to be shared. Do not let the fear of imperfection keep them locked away. English is just a medium. You are the message, and your message is valuable. So speak. Speak boldly. Speak freely. Speak with your heart. And watch how your life transforms. Not just in 60 days, but in every single day that you choose to show up for yourself. I am Jacob. I became fluent in 60 days. And if I can do it, you can do it. I am not special. I am just someone who decided that enough was enough. I am just someone who decided to bet on himself. And now I am betting on you because I believe in you. I believe in your potential. I believe in your strength. So go start today, not tomorrow, today. Speak, fail, learn, grow, and become the fluent speaker you were always meant to be. The world is listening, and your voice matters. Fluency begins the moment you stop fearing judgment and start embracing imperfection. Let me tell you what that really means. Because for the longest time, I had it completely backward. I used to believe that fluency was a destination, a finish line, a golden ticket that you earn only when you have finally eliminated every single mistake from your speech. I thought that one day, after enough practice, after enough memorization, after enough courses, I would wake up and speak perfectly, and then only then would I be worthy of calling myself fluent. But that day never came. It never comes for anyone, because perfection is not a place you arrive at. It is a ghost you chase forever. And while I was chasing that ghost, I was paralyzed. I was so terrified of making a mistake in front of another person that I chose silence over speech. I chose invisibility over vulnerability. I chose safety over growth. And I did not even realize that my fear of judgment was the very thing keeping me from the fluency I so desperately wanted. Think about it this way. When you were a child learning your native language, did you wait until you could form perfect sentences before you spoke? No, you babbled. You made sounds that were not even words. You pointed and grunted and said things that made no sense. Music. And your parents did not laugh at you with cruelty. They smiled. They encouraged you. They repeated the correct version back to you with love. They celebrated your attempts because they knew that every mistake was a step forward. But somehow, as we grow older, we lose that innocence. We become self-conscious. We start measuring ourselves against an impossible standard. We compare our beginning to someone else's middle. We forget that every fluent speaker you admire today once stumbled over the same words you are stumbling over now. The only difference is that they kept going. They did not let the fear of being judged stop them. They chose to be imperfect and loud over being perfect and silent. And here is the truth that changed everything for me. People are not judging you as harshly as you think they are. Most people are so consumed with their own lives, their own insecurities, their own struggles that they barely have the energy to notice your grammar mistakes. They are not counting your prepositions. They are not grading your tenses. They are listening to your message. They are trying to understand your heart. And if they do notice a mistake, most of them do not care. They make mistakes too. Every native speaker makes mistakes. Every public speaker makes mistakes. Every professor, every journalist, every author makes mistakes. Language is messy. It is alive. It evolves. And the people who are truly fluent are not the ones who never make mistakes. They are the ones who make mistakes and keep talking anyway. They are the ones who laugh at themselves and move on. They are the ones who understand that communication is not about grammatical perfection. It is about being understood. I remember a specific moment when I finally understood this. I was in a conversation with a group of people from different countries, and I was so nervous that my hands were shaking. I said something completely wrong. I used the wrong word, and the sentence came out nonsensical. I felt my face turn red. I wanted to disappear. But instead of judging me, one of the people in the group smiled and said, "I know what you meant. Clears throat." That happens to me all the time in my second language. And just like that, the tension broke. They shared their own story of making mistakes, and we all laughed together. In that moment, I realized that judgment was never the problem. The problem was my own inner critic, the voice that told me I was not good enough, that I was embarrassing myself, that I should just be quiet, and I decided to stop listening to that voice. I decided to give myself the same grace I would give a child learning to speak. I decided to celebrate my attempts instead of punishing my errors. Embracing imperfection also means accepting that your accent, your rhythm, your unique way of expressing yourself are not weaknesses. They are part of your identity. They are proof that you have a background, a culture, a story, and that story is what makes your voice interesting. When you speak with your natural accent, you are being authentic. You are being real. And people connect with realness far more than they connect with robotic perfection. The world does not need another person who sounds exactly like everyone else. The world needs you exactly as you are, with all your quirks and all your imperfections. So stop waiting for the day when you will be perfect. That day does not exist. Start speaking today with all your flaws, with all your fears, with all your beautiful imperfection, because that is where fluency truly begins. Not in the absence of mistakes, but in the courage to make them and keep going. You don't become fluent by studying English, you become fluent by living in it. And I need you to really sit with that statement, because it is the difference between years of frustration and months of transformation. For so long, I treated English like a school subject. I had my grammar textbooks, my vocabulary lists, my exercise workbooks. I would sit at my desk with a highlighter and a notebook, and I would study. I would memorize rusels. I would do fill-in-the-blank exercises. I would take practice tests. And after all that studying, I would feel like I had accomplished something. But then I would step into the real world, into a real conversation, and all that studying would evaporate. My mind would go blank. The rules I had memorized would become tangled. The vocabulary words I had recited would refuse to come to my tongue. And I would wonder why. Why was all this effort not translating into actual speaking ability? And the answer was simple. I was treating English like a museum piece. Something to admire and analyze, but not something to touch, not something to breathe, not something to live. Studying a language is like reading a manual about how to swim. You can read every chapter, you can memorize every stroke, you can understand the physics of buoyancy, but until you jump into the water, until you feel the cold splash on your skin, until you struggle and choke and kick, you will never learn to swim. The same is true for English. You can study grammar rules for a decade, but if you are not using the language in your daily life, if you are not immersing yourself in it, if you are not letting it become part of your everyday existence, you will never become fluent. Fluency is not an academic achievement. It is a lived experience. It is the sum total of all the moments you choose to think, feel, speak, and exist in that language. So I stopped studying English and started living in it. And I want to tell you what that looked like because it was not complicated, but it was radical. I changed my phone language to English. Every notification, every setting, every app, everything was in English. At first it was confusing. I could not find things. I had to guess what buttons meant. But within a few days, my brain started adapting. I was forced to read English constantly, not as an exercise, but as a necessity. I changed my laptop settings. I changed my social media settings. I started following English-speaking content creators, not because I was studying, but because I was curious about what they had to say. I started watching my favorite movies and TV shows in English without subtitles, and then with subtitles, and then without again. I watched them not to learn, but to enjoy. And in that enjoyment, I absorbed the rhythm, the slang, the intonation, the emotion behind the words. I also started listening to English podcasts everywhere. While I was cooking, I had a podcast playing. While I was walking to the store, I had a podcast in my ears. While I was lying in bed trying to fall asleep, I had a podcast on low volume. I listened to interviews, storytelling shows, comedy, news, philosophy. I listened to different accents, different speeds, different styles, and I did not understand everything. There were words I missed, references I did not get, jokes that flew over my head. But I did not pause to look up every unfamiliar word. I did not treat it as a study session. I just let the language wash over me. I let it enter my subconscious. I trusted that my brain, which is a magnificent pattern recognition machine, would start picking up the patterns on its own. And it did. After weeks of listening, I started noticing that certain phrases sounded familiar. Certain expressions started making sense in context. My ear became tuned to the music of the language. I also started reading in English, but not textbooks. I read books that I actually wanted to read, novels that made me feel something, memoirs that inspired me, self-help books that challenged me. I read articles about topics I was passionate about. I read comments on social media, long and short, casual and formal. I read not to analyze grammar, but to absorb the flow. I read to see how native speakers actually use the language in real contexts. I read to understand the natural word order, the common collocations, the everyday expressions that never appear in formal textbooks. And slowly, without even realizing it, I started internalizing those patterns. My writing improved, my speaking improved, because I was not just learning rules anymore. I was developing an instinct for the language, and perhaps the most important thing I did was start thinking in English. This was the game changer. I music stopped translating in my head. I stopped constructing sentences in my native language and then converting them to English. Instead, I forced my inner voice to switch to English. At first, it was slow and clunky. My thoughts felt shallow. I could only think in simple sentences. But I persisted. I narrated my day to myself in English. I described what I was seeing, feeling, doing. I had imaginary conversations in my head in English. I rehearsed what I would say in future situations, and over time, my thinking became more fluid, more natural. English stopped being a foreign code that I had to crack and started becoming a second skin, a second way of being. That is what it means to live in a language. It means making it so integral to your daily existence that it stops being an effort and starts being a part of you. And that is the only path to true fluency.